In the early 2000s, every major airline in the world faced the same crisis. Low-cost carriers were everywhere, seats kept getting cheaper, and passengers were leaving. The playbook was obvious: cut costs, drop prices, copy the competition. Almost everyone followed it. While American Airlines was stripping meal quality and charging for carry-on bags, while Delta was inventing basic economy to fight Spirit, Singapore Airlines was doing something that looked completely against the market. It was spending more, a lot more, and it came at an enormous cost that nobody in the industry saw coming. We just hit 30,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much, and don't forget to subscribe for more aviation videos. Air Asia was founded in 1993 as a near-bankrupt, money-losing operation. Within a decade, it had become one of the largest airlines in Asia, and it was targeting exactly the most profitable routes on Singapore Airlines' network. Meanwhile, in the West, the pressure was equally brutal. Between 2008 and 2014, 8 major American carriers merged until only 4 remained: Delta in Northwest, United in Continental, American in US Airways. That wasn't strategy, that was survival. The traditional model was being destroyed by low-cost carriers, and mergers were the only remedy executives could think of. The diagnosis was simple and frightening. Passengers who once paid more were migrating to cheaper flights on secondary routes. Every empty seat was money left on the table for a Ryanair, an Air Asia, or a Southwest. Now here's where it gets interesting. The instinctive response from legacy carriers was to imitate the enemy. In 2012, Delta became the first American airline to launch Basic Economy. Cheaper tickets, but with severe restrictions: no refunds, no seat selection, no flexibility. The others followed. The logic was compelling. If passengers want low prices, give them low prices. Cut meals, charge for bags, squeeze the space between seats. That way, you keep the customer without having to build a new company. The problem is that logic contaminates the entire brand. American Airlines spent years trying to compete with Frontier and Spirit penny by penny. Analysts describe that strategy as misguided. American never was and never would be a low-cost carrier. By fighting for pennies at the bottom, it stopped investing in the premium experience at the top. The result? It lost on both sides. That's what strategists call the stuck-in-the-middle trap. You're not cheap enough for the budget traveler, and you're not good enough for the premium passenger. Singapore Airlines saw that trap and made a pretty radical decision. Instead of degrading its main brand, Singapore Airlines reached the conclusion that was different from almost every competitor: build a separate company to serve the budget market, and never let the two touch. In 2010, the SIA Group acquired a majority stake in Tiger Air for short-haul operations. The following year, it created Scoot, a medium and long-haul low-cost carrier run autonomously with its own identity, its own culture, and one word that only it could claim: Scootitude. The crew's appearance and behavior rules were more relaxed than on Singapore Airlines' full-service flights. The tone was young, casual, almost irreverent, nothing like the iconic uniforms and impeccable service of Singapore Airlines. The separation wasn't cosmetic, it was structural. To avoid cannibalizing its own market, Scoot focused primarily on second- and third-tier cities, especially in China, complementing Singapore Airlines' network rather than competing for the same seats. But there was pushback. In October 2012, an editorial in a major industry publication was blunt: Scoot would contaminate the Singapore Airlines brand and cannibalize its sales. It was the most reasonable argument in the world. After all, the same group was selling 2 completely different products under the same origin. SIA's leadership bet the opposite, and the bet worked, for a reason that only seems obvious in hindsight. The executive flying business class from Singapore to London isn't comparing Singapore Airlines to Scoot. He's comparing it to Emirates, Cathay Pacific, Qatar Airways. Scoot simply doesn't exist on his radar. And the backpacker trying to get from Singapore to Tokyo for the lowest price possible, he's not expecting 5-star service, he just wants to get there. That's exactly what Scoot delivers. Both companies serve the same group, but never the same passenger on the same flight. That solves the cannibalization problem. But there was still the hardest question left to answer. If you're protecting the premium brand, what exactly do you do with it while the market is destroying itself down below? Singapore Airlines' answer was so counterintuitive that it deserves its own section. While Scoot was absorbing the pressure from the budget market, Singapore Airlines was making the opposite move. It was spending more at the top. In 2007, the airline received the world's first Airbus A380, and what it put inside that aircraft wasn't just a first-class cabin. It was a suite with a door, with a bed separate from the seat, with walls that closed. Nothing like it existed in commercial aviation. 10 years later, in 2017, the airline completely redesigned the product. The new suite had a reclining seat on one side and a bed that folded down from the opposite wall. Two separate pieces of furniture in the same private space. The standard went up again. On the Boeing 777-300ER fleet, the airline offers 4 first-class suites, each one just over 2 meters long and nearly 90 centimeters wide. An average suite costs around $20,000. Depending on the destination, it can be even more. That number is no accident. It's a deeply considered read of the global luxury market. And in November 2024, at a time when several airlines were still recovering from the pandemic, Singapore Airlines announced an $835 million investment to renovate the interiors of its entire long-haul fleet, including a new first-class product on the A350-900 the aircraft that operate the world's longest non-stop flights. Now, you might ask, why keep first class at all? That cabin represents a tiny fraction of revenue. Most airlines eliminated it years ago. The answer is more intriguing than it seems. First class doesn't exist to generate direct revenue. It exists to define who you are as a company. The people who fly in the suites talk about it. The people who have never flown in them but know they exist associate that standard of excellence with the entire airline. When that same passenger buys a business class ticket, which is where most of the premium revenue is actually generated, they're not buying a seat that turns into a bed. They're buying proximity to the best aviation product in the world. It's brand logic that works in cascading layers, and the numbers, in the end, leave no room for doubt.
Let's talk money. In fiscal year 2023-2024, Singapore Airlines posted a net profit of 2.67 billion Singapore dollars, its second consecutive year of record profits. Revenue reached 19 billion Singapore dollars, up 7% for the period. To put that in perspective, the airline handed its employees a bonus equivalent to nearly 8 months of salary. The low-cost subsidiary wasn't left behind either. Scoot carried over 67 million passengers to more than 70 destinations with a fleet of over 50 aircraft. It accounts for 14% of total seat capacity in Singapore and 43% of the country's entire low-cost capacity. But the most revealing figure isn't financial, it's reputational. In 2023, Singapore Airlines was named the best airline in the world by Skytrax for the 5th time in history. At the same ceremony, Scoot was named the best long-haul low-cost airline in the world. Mother and daughter at the top of their respective categories in the same year. In 2024, Singapore Airlines handed the overall title to Qatar Airways, but it was named the world's best airline for first class and finished second in the overall rankings, ahead of Emirates. That is the result of a strategy that many people considered reckless 15 years ago. And here's the part that makes all of this relevant beyond aviation. The lesson isn't that luxury always wins. The lesson is that brand identity is an asset that can be destroyed in years and takes decades to build. The American attempts to create low-cost subsidiaries in the 90s, Continental Light, United Shuttle, Delta Express, didn't go well. They were cheaper versions of the parent companies without the actual cost structure of a real low-cost carrier.
cheap on price for the passenger, too expensive to operate. And here's the central mistake all of those initiatives shared. They tried to use the same brand, the same employees, and the same culture to deliver a completely different product. It's like trying to sell a $5 burger and a $500 dinner inside the same restaurant with the same waiter on the same menu. The customer doesn't know what to expect, and when a customer doesn't know what to expect, they choose the competitor that makes it clear. Singapore Airlines understood that the problem wasn't operational, it was strategic. You cannot be two things at the same time for the same passenger. The American Airlines case is the mirror image. By trying to compete with Frontier and Spirit for price, the carrier stopped investing in the premium experience needed to rival Delta and United. It ended up neglecting both sides. The result was years of underperformance and a strategic crisis it's still trying to reverse. But here's what strikes me about this entire story. Singapore Airlines didn't arrive at this strategy by accident. It got there because it had the courage to ask a question most executives avoid. Who are we, really?
Not what does the market want, not what is the competition doing, but who are we and who do we exist for? The answer was clear. We exist for the passenger willing to pay for the best aviation product in the world. And if there's a market that isn't that, we'll build a separate company to serve it with the same seriousness but a completely different identity. That clarity required investment. It required risk. It required ignoring legitimate market pressures for years. But it also produced something very rare in commercial aviation, an airline that people love, not just choose, love. In an industry where most companies are merely tolerated, where you board thinking about landing, not about the experience, Singapore Airlines built something that passengers around the world describe as the highlight of a trip. And that, in the end, is priceless. Well, not exactly priceless. It costs $20,000 in a suite. What do you think of Singapore Airlines' strategy? Do you think building a separate company is worth it? Or were there other approaches that could have worked just as well? Let us know in the comments.